Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good oil. Catch a vibe today with Cam Slater leading us all the way from the heart of the...
As you all know, I love smoking cigars, but the best way to get into smoking cigars is to have somebody curate a set of cigars and send those to you every month. My mates at Canteros.nz provide me with the Hemingway subscription plan, and I get 4 or 5 cigars every month, curated by Grant, who's the cigar aficionado. And this month he sent me 4, and I have with me here in the humidor a Aging Room Quattro Nicaragua Sonata Maestro. It's a traditional torpedo shape. This one has been aged for 2 years in the humidor. It's ready for you to smoke now. All you have to do is go to Canteros.nz, tell them that Cam sent you, and then sign up for either a Hemingway subscription or a Passionado subscription, and you can get 4 or 5 cigars every month, just like me.
That's hot.
Welcome to episode 24 of the Good Oil Podcast. Seeby Woodhouse, it's been a long time since we caught up.
Yeah, you're looking really well. You lost a bit of weight, looking...
Fair bit of weight.
Looking sharp, yeah.
It looks like you've got those pounds that I lost.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, yeah.
Well, you were into
true.
bodybuilding and all of that for a while, weren't you?
Yeah, 10 years ago I was an Incredible Hulk, yeah, but then it sort of... The weight comes on when you stop lifting weights, so, yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've just got myself a rowing machine, started over Christmas, so I'm doing 40 minutes of rowing every morning.
Yeah.
It's made a huge difference.
Yeah, well, it looks like it. But yeah, thanks for calling me fat, the first thing you do, yeah.
Well,
No, I know I need to lose a little bit of weight. I'm not
all right.
terrible. For those people that are only on audio, I'm not horrendous, but I do want to
No.
lose a bit of weight, yeah.
Oh, well, I've been called fat and everything else since, I just use that as a motivator.
Yeah.
Look, you've got a Substack.
Yes.
And earlier in the year, when was it actually? It was December 29. So let's just before New Year, you posted an article called "The Totalitarian Slide," and I read that and I thought, I'm just going to read this again just to make sure I've got it sorted in my head.
Right.
I read through it a second time. I thought, I need to contact Seeby and get him on the podcast because
Sure.
This is the same sort of thinking that I've been watching, talking about, that's happening in worldwide politics, and it's happening very, very quickly and a lot faster than people can imagine. So I just wanted to touch on your views on that and anything else that we want to talk about. I mean,
Sure.
You've done a lot of things. You originally, what was your first company that you had?
Orcon. Which
Orcon,
is
that's right.
now basically the fixed line portion of 2 Degrees.
Yeah.
I made a lot of money in my 20s, basically retired, basically became a bum for virtually 20 years. And I hadn't actually run most of my stuff for 20 years other than kind of being an owner of various companies.
Yeah.
6 months ago, my CEO of Voyager, which is my new Orcon, but I've got about a dozen companies, mostly in tech, but some in property. My CEO got headhunted by Amazon Global, and I couldn't compete with the dollars. And then I kind of thought, okay, I need to find another CEO. But then I thought, hang on, that money for a CEO might be nice in my back pocket, because times have been tough over COVID. So I thought, hang on, I'll have a go doing the job again myself, and it was the right time to commit to it. I spent a few years overseas living in LA for about 5 years on and off, and I did a lot of travels. I've sort of been to 100 countries, and a decade ago I picked up photography and took 500,000 photos in sort of 100 countries. And there were things that I wanted to do in sort of my middle years where I felt like I needed to go see the world and I didn't want to be sitting behind a computer. But
you use that time for thinking though, don't you?
Yeah, now the world seems to be getting a bit more scary and New Zealand doesn't seem so bad, so I'm sort of quite happy to be back running a tech company, and it's just how life's worked out. Yeah. So, but yeah, I do have too much time for thinking, and I do have a very busy mind. So, it's probably better to keep you occupied on answering emails and things. Otherwise,
You've also battled through some health issues too, haven't you?
Mm.
I mean, I myself had a stroke 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was told I'd never use my right arm again. My face was all slumped and I looked awful. Well, you look at yourself in the mirror and you think, oh, fuck, I'm going to look like this.
Yeah.
And then you don't realise at the time that it's actually temporary, and that if you do certain things, you can reverse a lot of that. But the medical professionals don't tell you that. They just say you're fucked, basically, and thank you for staying here, and out you go.
Yeah, I mean, this is a divergent, but yeah, I mean, basically, you know, I wasn't too far off an intellectual lotto lout where I made, you know, $25 million before my 30th birthday, and then, you know, bought a $10 million house on the beach, and, you know, started throwing parties, which is no secret around Auckland. So yeah, I basically went completely hard, and that takes a toll on the body. So yeah, I've had sort of borderline stroke, borderline, you know, heart attacks and things, chronic high blood pressure and a bunch of things. Yeah, recently so one of the things I used to do is I used to go to a futurism conference called A360, which is run by Peter Diamandis, and Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil started the Singularity University.
Oh, yeah.
And Ray Kurzweil is the world's foremost futurist. He kind of has exactly predicted the rise of AI. He invented text to speech. He invented the Dvorak, I don't know, not the Dvorak keyboard, but the electric piano, and a bunch of, you know, he's got more patents than I think anyone else alive. So anyway, it was sort of A360 was this big meeting of minds. It used to be limited to 360 CEOs, tech CEOs, which is why I went. I was the only New Zealander or Australia to kind of go or be invited. But I used to get to hang out with the Google guys and bigwigs, and, you know, it's like a bit of a TED conference. And one of the things
TED conference for geeks.
Yeah, but, you know, really heavy hitting guys. And so one of the things they used to do was basically have a longevity section. So like Dr. David Sinclair, who's one of the foremost longevity researchers, would go. Dave Asprey, the guy who started Bulletproof Coffee, was there. So I got to hang out with all those guys and talk about, you know, kind of what's going on. And I believe it's Dr. Midori who invented the Yamanaka factors, which control aging, and a whole lot of stuff. So a few years ago, I started getting some pretty serious health issues, and I was just not in a good way.
Yeah.
And ended up contacting those guys, and I've done a bunch of stem cells and sort of some exosome therapies and things, which have made like a massive difference, because I think something inside was a bit, buggered up, and I was struggling, because it's like when you don't have energy, then you can't have energy to exercise, and then it's like this cascading thing. But yeah, I mean,
there's all sorts of fancy names, and they call, you know, syndromes and things like that, isn't it? Basically, you've worn your body out.
Yeah.
And you've got to reset it. I mean, I had a hard reset. I had a stroke, and that really woke me up, and thought, well, okay, I can either keep doing what I'm doing and die, or I can change.
Yeah, so this is going deep into it, but as I say, I used to go to this conference where they literally would, teach you a bunch of stuff. And from that conference, going multiple years, I learned, you know, there's about 16 major disciplines of aging research. They've all got different things like telomere length, removing senescent cells, you know, stopping cancer progression, and all of those things can take you out. So there's all of this research that's going on, but Dr. David Sinclair, has literally started successfully doing what's called epigenetic reprogramming. So basically, when you're an embryo, which is a fertilized egg, you have the egg and the sperm, you get an embryo. The DNA that's made obviously has all of the instructions on how to build your body, and then that primordial stem cell becomes 2 cells and 4, and all of those cells can kind of become any cell in the body, and then eventually they start specializing, and then eventually you get like heart cells that can't become eye cells and that kind of thing. But all of our cells, and I believe there's about 23 trillion in the human body, contain that first set of DNA replicated. So you have 23 trillion backup copies of your initial DNA, and that's why if you're at a crime scene and you drop some skin or something, they can take that DNA, and match it to your, genetic fingerprint. So that's essentially like the original instruction set. But what happens, and that's called your genome, your human genome. But then what happens is if a cell is going to become something like a heart cell or an eye cell, it then only takes a tiny, tiny portion, 1/10,000th of that DNA, expresses it, writes the instruction set, and then becomes a cell. And the actual cells is what's known as your epigenome. And so the genome is like digital information with the 4 DNA-based pairs, but the epigenome, which is your cells, is analog information like a tape or a record. And as your cells, copy themselves as you age,
They degrade.
And the copies get worse and worse, just like if you copy a cassette tape multiple times. Well, what they found is there's a way using CRISPR technology to actually take a segment of your genome, which is the original, software that was your body was created on, overwrite the damaged epigenetic code and then reset your cells to an earlier stage. So it was just last week they basically announced we are going to be living to 150 very, very soon. They've already taken specific organs like a liver. They took a guy that was 80 years old, had 3 heart attacks, and then restored his heart tissue to like a 15-year-old. With a bunch of $1 million viruses and all that kind of thing. But we're essentially starting to learn how to write and read DNA as kind of computer code, and then AI is helping us to understand it. So it's literally insane what's happening in that field right now.
So that's really fascinating that you mentioned that, because with the COVID pandemic, people were saying to me, what's the story with these vaccines? They're asking me questions and things like that. I said, well, it's kind of like this. You make your own mind up about it, but it's kind of like this. Your body's a computer. And it has a whole set of instructions, which is in your DNA and in your mRNA. Those are set message. The mRNA sends all the messengers to the various other different parts of your body that tells it what to do. And that's saying that they've made a piece of code that will work on every computer that's out there. And I said, I've worked with computers, and I've worked with various different platforms, from mainframes to Unix to PCs to Macs to all of those. And I can tell you one thing: no one's yet made a piece of software that'll talk to all of those things without there being issues. And they're telling us that we're going to have that injected into our arm, and that's going to fix every single person. I said, I don't believe that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get cancelled because obviously being in media, there's some things that
I've
you can
already
talk
been
about.
cancelled.
There's things you can talk about, and there's things you're not allowed to talk about, and kind of vaccines is one of those. But it's just a minefield of trying to go into it. But one thing that is kind of an open secret in the medical community, or the medical people that I've talked to, is that COVID itself doesn't actually affect all ethnic groups equally.
No.
So essentially, just like black people have more short twitch muscle fibers, and that's why they're always going to win sprinting
Gold
at the
medals
Olympics and all that
yeah.
kind of thing. Different races have different compositions of like muscle tissue or this kind of thing, and so the COVID virus and the vaccine affects different kind of people slightly differently. That's the one thing I know for sure. There's a lot of things about, was it created in a lab or a bat or blah, and well, I don't want to go into that. Who knows?
It was created, end of
yeah.
story. How it was created, I don't think we'll ever get the truth on that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things that happened, though, during COVID are exactly the things that you mentioned in that article, in the totalitarian slide. And it happened very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the rights of people and what the world looks like pre-COVID and post-COVID, it's only 5 years, and it's pretty horrendously different. And then if you look at like the stated agenda of the WEF, Agenda 2030 and 15-minute cities and all that kind of stuff, it's perfectly positioned. So it's like, well, either COVID came along at a very opportune time, or it was kind of a good test of how things are going to work going forward. But yeah, I mean, if you just go back in your head, like how much kind of anxiety or mental illness or control there was in the world. I mean, there was this Norwegian guy who went to the US, and he had like a meme of JD Vance as a fat guy on his phone, and then he got turned around and said, okay, you're barred from the US. And then he was like, what about free speech? And they said, well, that only applies to US citizens, so you don't get free speech. But I'm like, are we really at the stage where countries are saying, we're going to search your phone, and if you have a meme we don't like, we're going to ban you from the country? I mean, that's pretty crazy, like, and that's actually happening. And then, obviously things like ICE, I think it's perfectly reasonable for a country to say we don't want illegal immigrants in our country, but the way that obviously things are going about, it's like US citizens that are being shot, and there's crazy stuff happening. They're masked, they don't have ID badges.
I put that down to stochastic terrorism, right? I don't know if you know what that term is, but it's where terrorism is. The idea of terrorism is put into people's heads by politicians or people in power or people in authority, that it's okay to do something because those people are Nazis or those people are bad or those people. Because if you look at the statistics, ICE has been around since Obama's era, right? So a long time. And if you look at the deportations under Trump, it's about 1.2 million deportations under Trump. Everyone forgets that all those people that they're deporting were there illegally, right? So they didn't get a green card. And you know what that's like because you've lived in the LA for a reasonable amount of time. So presumably you would have had a green card or some sort of official thing that you did. But most of these people are illegal. But under Obama and under various different presidents, they deported millions more and there weren't any protests. Right? ICE was operating and there weren't any protests. But the Democrats have put it into the minds of their followers that these people are bad and this is terrible and that these are all innocent. And so you've got these crazy people that don't think very much about anything other than this is bad, so I'm going to go and protest it, thinking they're bulletproof. And they're not. And then you get the narratives that spin out of each side of that argument as well. I mean, is it terrible that these US citizens got shot? Yes, it is. But who put them on the streets? Right? They didn't come to that of their own volition. They didn't decide all of a sudden. I take the last guy that got shot. He decided that he'd go to a protest, he'd interfere and touch police officers or ICE officers and be armed at the same time. Well, he has a right under the US Constitution to bear arms, but he doesn't have a right to interfere with police operations. And as soon as he breached the law on the police operations, your right to bear arms disappears at the same time. So,
yeah.
So
I mean,
it's a terrible tragedy, but these things happen in seconds, and bad shit happens really quickly when it comes rushing at you. So if he didn't have a gun, would he have been shot? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's not really a lot of good stuff to say. I mean, America looks pretty balked, if you ask me. But I do believe.
But it's the same here.
I do believe that America has the right to not have people that don't have passports in the country. But then Europe's basically the opposite. Europe's like, we want everyone to come in from anywhere and see what happens.
But it's not everyone. That's the problem, isn't it? In Europe, the people who are coming in there are mostly males between 18 and 35. Where's the females? Where's the children? Where's the families? These are fighting age people. What it is in Europe and in the UK and in most of Europe, there's a few countries that are resisting it, like Poland, for example. Hungary's another one. They're saying, nah, borders closed.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of wondering about this, and I was gonna write a Substack about it, a year ago, and I thought I'll talk about immigration and stuff, and then I was like, well, it's a contentious subject, and I haven't seen for myself, but last year I wasn't CEOing a Voyager, which now keeps me busy and keeps me on a leash. But I had a European/African holiday for 3 months last year. So I did 15 countries over June, July, August. And one of the countries that I went to was Sweden. I'd never been there and I'd always wanted to go. And dude, I was like really shocked at what's going on there. I mean, yeah, it is. Basically, the Swedish, Norwegian and Finns had the highest quality of life, the highest level of happiness. They're lovely people. They've got lovely architecture. They've got a beautiful place to live. There's 10 million Swedes, and they let in 2 million immigrants. Unfortunately, not anti-immigrant. Like if you want to, have a job and you want to integrate into society, but this is 2 million people, mainly males, mainly fighting age, who don't want to integrate into society, who want a free handout, and the Norwegians and the
And are quite prepared
Swedes
to use
wanted
violence to take what they want.
wanted to give them, handouts, because the Swedish thinking, I think, was that basically everyone is the same, and if you bring a bunch of people in and then treat them how everyone else acts
They'll
around,
become like
they'll
us.
become like us. But maybe that is true to an extent, but it's probably not true beyond a certain velocity. And the issue is that the people that I saw, and 80% of the people I saw, the Swedish people, were, I mean, you can't deny it. At the end of the day, like, Swedish people are some of the most beautiful people you'd ever see. The males and the females, they're just gorgeous people. That's just a fact. And then there's 20% of the population that are kind of the opposite, that just really just want to have a handout and cause mayhem, and you don't feel safe around those people. And it's like, what is going on,
And it's
so
New Zealanders tend to be, when they go overseas, a little bit naive about the reality of the world. We see this all the time. People have stories. I was in traveling around by a female. I was traveling by myself in Pakistan, and I was accosted on the street by this awful man. Now, we live in New Zealand. We think you can walk the streets and be perfectly safe, and by and large you can in New Zealand. But the rest of the world is not New Zealand. And there are some disgusting human beings out there, and in vast quantities of them, and just in percentage. What's the population of Pakistan? I don't know, 40 million or something like that. Let's say that 5% are horrible people. Well, 5% of 40 million is an awful lot of people, far more than 5% of 5 million.
Yeah, so anyway, my experience in Sweden, I was kind of like, wow, this country has really screwed itself by their decisions or whatever's happened. I did go to Poland, I did go to Hungary, and it's the opposite. Poland and Hungary feel super safe, but the EU is fining both of those countries €1 million a day for not allowing immigration. And so you're like, what is the benefit of the EU if they're fining you for protecting your way of life or your population, so I don't understand I don't want to assume what's going on, but it's not great. And yeah, I mean, I've been to India like 3 times, and met some of the most beautiful people over there. Some of the culture about India is amazing,
Yeah.
But the country is really filthy because they have 1.5 billion people in a small area. But interestingly, they don't have like a lot of depression and stuff. So for me, an observation about India is they tend to, because they're all very like religious and there's a lot of prayer and a lot of community support and things. I didn't really see a lot of mental illness. So it's kind of in the West we have clean streets, but we have like the messes in our minds.
Yeah.
We're at home being alone and like not taking care of our old people. In India, old people are kind of part of the community, and like everyone gets up in the morning and prays to the sun and all that kind of stuff. So to me, it's like the mess in India is like on the streets, but like actually the people are, by and large pretty good. But I talked to an Indian guy when I was there, and one of the things that sort of stuck me is he said, one of the reasons like Western women get a hard time, because he was obviously like a good dude, is he said that India has arranged marriages, and so like his Indian countrymen don't learn kind of game. They don't learn how to chat up a woman. They don't learn kind of boundaries. It's like you get given a wife and then like she's kind of yours. So you don't learn courting or like convincing or anything. It's just, it is. And the other thing that he said was really interesting was he said that like obviously they have the internet in India. Obviously they have internet everywhere, but like the majority of porn is produced in Santa Ana in California with like white women. And so it's kind of the perception in a lot of countries that like, oh, like when we look at porn, all we see is white women, and so that's what white women are like. And I was like, wow, it's like a mind-blowing thing I'd never really thought about.
It's quite a simple explanation, isn't it?
But I was like, shit, is this, yeah, okay, like we see people one way, like as Kiwis we see Indians one way, and then Indians see, then like it's a real problem. Porn is a real problem. And so yeah, with this, decision that's been made to allow unlimited Indians into New Zealand, like I employ Indians, I've got some great Indians working for me. I've been to India. There's some nice people there. This guy that I talked to, but I like, do we want to allow 500,000 and that have a very different culture? I don't know what's going on with that. Like, it seems, we're not really getting much free trade benefit. And I actually saw a TikTok the other day that was from an Indian in India saying, it's easy to go to New Zealand now. Let's all go to New Zealand. Like, basically promoting as an influencer, like, look at what,
But in
crazy.
New Zealand, these sorts of debates, which are necessary to have, growing up debates about immigration, what do we want that to look like, has been shouted down over the years. Again, it comes back to this article of yours, the totalitarian slide, that if you don't have an approved view, then you're othered, shut down, cancelled. And so we've got this homogenous view in our media and also amongst our politicians that we need to be part of this globalist action to do all of these things, and everything will be great. Everything will be, you'll have nice apple pie for dessert every night. It'll be fantastic. We'll get great restaurants, from the immigrants that are coming in. Everything's going to be great. But it isn't great. We've seen what unfettered immigration looks like around the world. And I struggle to see why we want to make the same mistakes that the UK has made. The United States hasn't made that mistake. They've had a border and they've said we want to stop people coming. Just various politicians have not enforced it or whatever. When someone enforces it, the borders are pretty tight. But we've got this mindset, this twee view of the world, that if we're just nice to people when they come here, then they'll be nice and become like us. And Sweden is a case in point. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And everyone mocked Donald Trump when he said, I don't know, why are we letting all these people in from shithouse countries, right? And they criticised him, said, that's appalling, it's racist. You know what it was? Most people heard that and went, you know what, he's right. Right? And they've got these shitty countries and they come here and they want to bring the same shitty behaviours that made their country shitty to make our country shitty. I'm not sure that's a good plan.
Yeah, I can't disagree, but like both of us would quite likely get cancelled for expressing anything near
I've
that
been
kind of
cancelled
opinion.
before. Like I said, I've been cancelled before. I don't care. You've got to say these things out loud.
Yeah,
And
at the end of the day, there's cultural norms, and cultural norms are differences. So, like, one of my favourite comedians says, I hate racism. Racism is really, really bad. I would never do it. Why would you criticise, a group of people just because of the way that they all behave? Well, it's kind of, pushing that boundary a little bit. But there's just different cultural norms. Like, I was in Marrakesh, Morocco last year. I was in Dubai. When I'm in those countries and I see people wearing burqas and doing various things their way, I don't have an issue with it because that's their way of life. But, if people come to New Zealand and want to start changing us and demanding call for prayer or whatever it's going to be, where's our respect of like our way of life being preserved? Is that the case? If that's the case, that's fine, but it should be a non-negotiable term, and it's just kind of not. The rules aren't being laid down like that.
Well, I'll give you a local version of that, right? Without being, we don't need to have race involved in this discussion because it doesn't involve race, but it involves attitudes. If you take Waiheke Island, for example, right? And I recently lived on Waiheke Island.
Sorry to hear that.
See,
Just kidding.
So right? There's two Waihekes. There's the Waiheke that everybody thinks is great because they go to the vineyards, get themselves hammered, then tip themselves back on the ferry and go home again. And there's the Waiheke of the locals that are people who live there. And they've got this sort of overbearing, woke ideology that's through the whole island, where they talk about inclusivity and we're all inclusive and we're all this and we're all that, except you. Right? There's always an except you, and that was usually the finger pointed at me.
Shouldn't be such a right winger then, yeah.
Yeah, like and like there's a few right wingers that are over there, but they don't even say anything because they can't go anywhere and do anything without somebody sticking their nose in. Oh, you should be this or you should be that, or oh that. There was even a Facebook group set up to try and run me off the island. Right, so they're not inclusive.
Yeah.
Right, if you don't fit into their worldview, green, happy, not even hippie view of the world. This is like the Greens as they are now. very doctrinaire, very ideological. If you don't fit into that, if you don't want to have cycleways on the roads and in the middle of the road, which is what they've done in Waiheke, if you don't want to have rainbow crossings and rainbow flags, then you're the enemy and they want you gone. And that's got nothing to do with race, it's got to do with ideology. And that's happening right here in New Zealand, right here in Auckland City.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, being devil's advocate, you know, if they're a community of people and they want to run things their way, then they're kind of entitled to do that, right? So
well, that's the problem is they don't run it their way, because we do live in a democracy, and my vote's just as valuable as the next person's vote. And sure, you can have the local council and you can do all of those things. That's fine, but you can't tell me how I'm going to live my life, right?
But isn't that kind of the same as, like, say for example, if you know, New Zealand lets in unlimited people that are foreign that don't share our values, like Maoris and Pākehā now are only 55% of the population, so 45% of New Zealand is not Maori Pākehā, and pretty soon it's going to be 51% is not Pākehā. So what does that mean? You know, and then you know, so your sort of analogy of like. You know, I'm a kiwi, therefore the Waiheke Islanders should do things my way. That's going to be the attitude of the 51% of New Zealand is going to be saying, well, I believe kiwi means this new thing, and therefore the 49% need to do what I want to say. So we're only.
But what does a kiwi mean these days? You know, what does it mean? Because
it's
different, isn't it?
It's going to become diluted. And as I say, like, yeah, I'm not against immigrants. I'm not against people saying I want to live in a different country and I'll, you know, understand what that country's values are and, you know, get along with people. But, yeah, just opening the borders to unknown people. I mean, there was a huge scandal in Australia with Indians faking, you know, driver's licenses and qualifications and all kinds of things.
Well, it's a huge scandal here too.
You know,
there's like something like 200 truck drivers have had their licenses revoked.
Yeah,
you know, like,
and I'm not. I don't want anyone to think I'm picking on Indians. So I'm not picking on Indians. As I say, I've been to India 3 times. Had an amazing time in India, but as per the example that I gave of the guy that I talked to, sometimes there's cultural differences with some of those people. So it's like, what type of, you know, which ones are we getting, and how many, and you know, it needs to be manageable.
See, countries have their foibles. You know, places like Japan, the citizenry are generally rule followers. There's not very many people in Japan that buck the rules, same in Korea, right? It's just how they are.
But also very high trust societies.
Very high trust societies. And we say we've got a high trust society, but the trouble is that when someone breaches that trust, we actually don't do anything about it. So we're not a high trust society.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things from living in the US that kind of made me sad, you know, like whenever I would come back to New Zealand, is that even like Mexicans and things that have like immigrated to the US and have a US passport and things, you see them like flying the US flag, and like there's a real, America's such a patriotic country that, like, you know, people do get up and sing the anthem, and a lot of the times even immigrants that go to America, they're really proud to be, you know, an American, and once they get there. And in New Zealand, we've still got this kind of, as I say, division between Maori and Pākehā. You know, it's like the Maoris have their, you know, flag. We couldn't decide on a flag change. Ours is kind of a British flag. So there's 2 flags that you see flying. It feels like we're butting heads over things like, you know, treaty stuff. And
if you go down to South Auckland,
combined, we're only 55% of the population now. And it shouldn't even be Maori and Pākehā versus the 45%, but we all have to figure out how to get along. And I think whatever New Zealand ends up being, it should be that we're proud to be here and we want to be part of a culture, because it's going to be, if we don't get our shit together and kind of, you know, define a national identity and feel a national identity, being proud of a national identity, whether you're an Indian immigrant, a Chinese immigrant, a Maori, a Pākehā, whatever, then we're going to end up in multiple segments all fighting each other. And that's what creates a high trust society, is where people agree on a common set of rules, behaviours and things that tie them together. And New Zealand, when you go away and come back again, you kind of realise, yeah, there's this tension. It's sad, it's unpleasant. I don't know how to solve it. I'm not an expert on that, but it makes me sad when I go away and I see a country like America that has a lot of problems but also has that patriotic unity, and then I come to New Zealand and it feels very fractured. So
well,
you
just have to drive down to South Auckland. I'm not dismissive of South Auckland. It's where I was brought up as a kid. But people drive around with Tongan flags or Samoan flags hanging off their car with, you know, often 3 or 4 of them on the car, and all power to them. But you live in New Zealand. You've chosen to live in New Zealand. Nobody forced you to live here. You've chosen to live here, and you keep flying. It's the same with the Palestinian protesters that assemble and annoy everybody in the CBD every weekend, and they're all sitting there flying the Palestinian flag. Right? None of they. On one hand, they say they're Palestinian. On the other hand, they say they're Kiwis. Well, what is it? Can you be both? I mean, I was born in Fiji, but I don't fly the Fijian flag wherever I go. I'm a proud New Zealander, you know. But my place of birth is happenstance. I just happen to have been born in Fiji. Doesn't give me any extra privileges or anything. I do consider myself in some respects to be a Fijian, but hey, I'm European. So everyone thinks a Fijian's brown, you know. But I do feel at home when I go there. But I'm still a Kiwi travelling on a Kiwi passport. So I fear that we will have the balkanisation of society with mass importation of incompatible cultures coming to New Zealand. But the problem is no one will agree what a Kiwi is. No one will agree what is our culture, because you go and ask a Green supporter what that is. It's completely different from a National Party supporter or a New Zealand First supporter.
Yeah.
And the reality is that every political party bar one in our current parliament are pretty much globalist in their outlook.
And their one is New Zealand First, I assume.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I'm a Winston fan.
Well, you know, I used to slag him off ridiculously, you know. I was a creature of partisan politics. I was brought up in a political family steeped in the National Party, and I realised after Dirty Politics that everything I knew about Winston Peters was not from Winston himself. It was from National Party people saying this is what Winston's about. And after Dirty Politics, I decided to abandon partisan political politics. I am conservative. I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm socially liberal. I don't care who somebody sleeps with. I don't care whether they are Christian or atheist or whatever. It doesn't bother me. I'm happy with what my own self is. I don't see a need to impose any of that on other people. And then if you try and impose your views on how I want to live my life in the privacy of my home, well, then we've got a problem. But up until then, I'm all, you know, peace, love and mung beans. But I set about actually finding out about Winston Peters by actually going and meeting him and talking with him. And I found a different person than the person that I've been told he is. And unfortunately, we don't all get the chance to do that. But if you look past the statements that have been made in the past about him and look at what he actually says and what he actually does, I just wish more people would see that and give him more votes at the election to give him more seats that allows him to get more things in the coalition agreement. And that's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, I've met Winston several times, and yeah, he's a dude. You know, he's really
he deeply cares
cool
about
dude.
New Zealand.
Yeah,
I think in a way that Christopher Luxon couldn't ever try and tell us. You know.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the sort of, you know, it takes a long time to kind of learn how the world works, and you know, there's the famous saying, I'm sure you would have heard, that if you're not a lefty when you're young, you don't have a heart, and if you're not right wing when you're old, you don't have a brain. And there's some truth to that, but the older I've gotten, the more I've sort of realised that, the left versus right debate, I would call Winston almost kind of a centrist or a sensibilist, but when you get into kind of left and right arguments, there's always like a seen effect of a policy which is normally popular, and then there's an unseen effect which is kind of the desired effect or the unintended consequences. So let me give an example. When I went to university 20, 30 years ago, and I didn't pass, but there was a scholarship program for Maori and Pacific Islanders, which is fine. You say, okay, the university wants a certain number of Maori and Pacific Islanders. So in our engineering division, it was kind of like we've got a quota that we want to get these guys to pass.
Yeah.
And it's going to be good for society if we have more, Maori Pacific Islander engineers. The trouble is that the quota they had wasn't even kind of anywhere near filled. There weren't even enough applicants. So there was a couple of guys, of Maori Pacific Island descent, and essentially they got a free pass, they got private tuition, they got a leg up. And you can say, okay, that's a leftist policy. We want more representation. You look at it, it's fine. The trouble is because their grades were like low and substandard, and then they got to pass with everyone else. If I then started an engineering company, and I said, okay, well, the council is going to pay me to build a bridge or something, then am I going to hire, a Maori Pacific Islander engineer? And I'm going to say no, because in my opinion, those guys got a free pass, so they're not good engineers. Now, if there's a Maori Pacific Islander who's actually a crack engineer and does a stellar job, he can't get a job because then it's creating the racism which it's supposed to be destroying. And so actually the seen consequences, hey, we're being really good, we're giving like incentives to try and bring the population up, but then the unintended consequence of inequality is that actually, those people end up getting pushed further down, and they never see that. So, Labor does this all the time, where they kind of give a handout.
Healthy homes is a classic example.
And then it creates, all these unintended consequences on the back end. So then National tries to reverse all of those, but then it looks like,
they're heartless.
one thing, and then it, says on the other. So, I believe in the centrist policy, or the conclusion that I've come to over 30 years, is that the only way is to kind of basically say, hey, we're all equal, and Winston and Seymour kind of take this kind of thing. If like we're all got to be in it together, there can't be special rules for this. You can't have a special clinic for that, or a special court for this person, or whatever, because
it's sensible, right?
The handout that looks beneficial actually does damage behind the scenes. And I think Labor knows a lot of that. Like a lot of their popular policies are actually really detrimental to the communities they're supposed to be helping. But you have to really think through and step through what is the consequence, what's the consequence, what's the consequence. Then you go, oh, this is actually bad for this community. But it's publicised as being good for this community.
Politicians do this all the time. They announce something, right? And Labor did fees free, first year fees free. That's going to get more people into university. Actually, we probably don't need more people into university, because there's people getting useless degrees and not doing anything with it. Do we really want them to go to university?
Yeah, so this is a classic thing where if you wanted to go to university, so government's doing fee subsidisation and using public money for education, I'm totally against. And it's exactly the kind of thing that sounds good, like we're going to provide money for education. But in the US, this policy has kind of reached maximum perversion, in that 100 years ago you used to be able to go to Stanford for a penny. There was competition between universities, and when you have competition where universities say we want to provide an education at the best price, then it drives the price down. Now, when you get government involved in education, and they say the taxpayer is going to pay for education, what does it do? It creates more supply. Oh, we'll give you an interest-free loan, therefore everyone can get education. Therefore, there's a fixed number of universities with people getting free handouts to go. So then there's more universities that want more handouts, and the price of education goes up and up and up, and then you still can't get a job at the end of it because there's no people doing in trades and this kind of thing. So essentially, by subsidising education, you end up making education really unaffordable, and you end up with a whole bunch of people doing degrees that they're never going to get a job in.
I remember having an argument with a guy called Lindsay Ferguson. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before.
I've heard of him, I don't know him.
He wanted to be the president of the National Party, and he was starting a biofuel company. So that's a few years back, right?
I remember, yeah.
And I said to him, why are you doing that? And he said, what would you know, you're a kid, like he was dismissive. And I said, I don't know, but this kid knows that if a government has to subsidise a business, it's not a business. And what a government can give, another government can take. So if you go and set up a business that's based on subsidies to produce. He said, oh no, it's fantastic. He said, we've got all of this tallow in New Zealand, produced by the meat industry. And if we put that into fuel, then we can do this. I said, I don't know about you, but I know that tallow is sold on the open market at a competitive rate that starts at $1 a litre. And like you want to make fuel out of that, so you're going to add value to it, but your starting price for the core product is $1 a litre, you're already behind the 8 ball. And then you've got government subsidies, and now you're going to make it, it's going to be $2.50 a litre. Well, that stage fuel wasn't $2.50 a litre, right? It was something like $1.95 or something like that. I said, this is a dumb idea.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I agree with you. I think there are certain cases when government money can help. Like, say, for example, if building a hydroelectric power station
Chorus is a good
going
example.
to, yeah, I think Chorus was done well. And if you look at internet in America, it's you know, the internet that I had in Beverly Hills was way worse than internet in New Zealand because there's overbuilding. You know, you could get 4 different networks, but then a lot of them, you know, had crappy network investment and you couldn't get the one you wanted, and you know, because it's all, you know, free for all. So New Zealand has kind of a single network where, you know, it was built at, you know, the lowest cost, and there's no network overbuilding. It's not like two networks per address or anything. So yeah, there's sometimes government money makes sense, but by and large, you know, subsidising things doesn't make sense. And you know, the oil and gas industry getting subsidised is completely stupid, because if people want oil and gas, that's fine, but we shouldn't be subsidising it. And the other thing that's, you know, kind of crazy is when we do things like give free mining permits. You know, I believe in mining. We obviously need minerals. We need things. But when you give free minerals, you know, permits, and then you make the public pay for, you know, cleanup spills and that sort of stuff. So, you know, when mining companies get to, you know, damage and don't have to do repair, it's, you know, a real problem.
It should be built into, you know,
Yeah, but they should be allowed to operate, but they should be like, you have to pay the total cost of, you know, the damage that you're going to do. It's not like you get to keep private profits and then public damage has to be done, and that's happened a lot, you know.
But, you know, another good example of that is Labor's good intentions ruined by reality. It's the healthy homes. Are we going to make everybody's houses healthy homes? Everyone's going to live in a healthy home from now on. Oh, yes, and how are we going to do that? Well, we'll subsidise the landlords putting in heat pumps. And I said, you know, when that came out, I thought, are you crazy? Like, seriously, the landlords will take that money. Yes, they will put in the heat pumps, but no one can force the tenants to use the heat pump. It's not wired in hard, and it's continuing to use. So it's not actually making their house healthy. It's giving them the opportunity to have their house healthy. But on top of that, Labor's stupid. I remember Grant Robertson said at the time, oh, we believe that landlords won't pass on the cost. Well, the cost of a normal-sized house, or an average-sized house, to put in heat pumps was about $5,000. Well, every landlord that I know took that $5,000, amortised it over 12 months, worked out what the increase in the rent was, and put the rent up. And Labor stupidly thought that wasn't going to happen. Well, it did happen, because you gave them money to incentivise them to do that. So of course they did it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about public money that's different from personal money or you know, business money is that when you know, even if you have a big company like, you know, Amazon or Google or something, they're still responsible to their shareholders and Jeff Bezos to agree. But there's someone basically going, why are we doing this retarded thing, spending all this money? There's someone to answer. And like when as a person you get asked to spend money on your house, you think, is this a good investment? When the government starts sticking their nose into people's business and making random decisions about, you know, fences or heat pumps or whatever,
Swimming
then of course
pool fences is another one.
You get distortions where you know, all of a sudden the money is spent extremely inefficiently. And if you look at things like our ferry projects or the rail or, you know, whatever,
Roading
it's like,
contracts.
you know, no one in government, well, not no one, but you know, you can drop $30 million, and if the taxpayer has to pay for it because there's some mistake, no one gets it in the neck. Whereas if it's a private company or personal, you go bankrupt and you pay with like your own dollar bill. So this is the kind of risk. So small government, you know, is the desire, because you want an economy where people actually care about where money is being allocated and what it's being spent on. And the bigger government gets, you know, the worse it gets. So, you know, Ronald Reagan's famous saying, you know, the scariest words in the English language
I'm
is,
from the government, I'm here to
I'm
help
here
you.
to help you. Yeah. You know, that's what you don't want. So, I mean, New Zealand, you know, by size of the population and number of politicians, we're way overstacked. You know, and I think we've got like a lot of fluff. And I disagree with you on some things, like, you know, things like pool fences or smoking or some things that are the public good. You know, government has to step in at some point.
Yeah, but
government overreach is not useful.
Yeah, I mean,
you know.
pool fences as an example, and I know that because when I was a kid, we had a pool, and the council would come around. Oh, you're not compliant. Well, it's our pool. It's in our property. You want to get in here, you got to climb a 6-foot fence. Oh, that doesn't matter. You got to fence the pool as well.
You'll find if you don't pay your rates, you'll find out it's not your property pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it was a cost that was put on pool owners or property owners, and the whole idea was to save 15 people a year who drowned in pools, most of which were toddlers, which means somebody wasn't supervising their child. And it never came back to, well, how did that happen? Right? My mother was so vigilant, like a hedgehog could drop into the pool and she'd be awake at the other end of the house, coming out and finding out what's splashing in the pool.
Yeah, one of the greatest disasters of unintended consequences ever, and if anyone in listening has been, or you've been to the US and you've ever been to a hotel pool, you will see in a US hotel pool one of those like handicap chairs with like a crane, so that someone in a wheelchair can basically like be craned into the pool. I mean, they're incredibly ugly. Every pool has them, and you actually, you go around US pools and you'll see empty concrete pools with those chairs and things. So, I can't remember which president it was. I think it was Bush or something. Hope it wasn't Reagan. I don't think it would have been Reagan. But anyway, one of the presidents, their wife kind of said a thing, we need this like disability type stuff. And so it was mandated that, every public pool had to have, an access. Now, the goal of having physically handicapped people be able to enjoy water, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that. But people should be able to do that in a way that is wanting. And the trouble is that, there was just a huge amount of unintended consequences. So there was consultants, there was pool crane people, there was installation.
Well, the pool crane by itself would probably cost $50,000.
There's all this kind of thing. So there's this massive burden on society.
Maintenance.
Which was, hundreds of millions, if not billions. I mean, all over America, everywhere you go, every public pool has this little crane with a seat that someone and I've never ever seen someone handicapped ever use it.
Well, it's like cycleways in Auckland.
So the damage of essentially billions of dollars of compliance, checking, creating these things that aren't used, rusting, it's a burden on the business. So the hotel has to charge more money because they've got this thing they have to maintain, they have to be compliant, and then it's like maybe 1 in 100 years, someone in a wheelchair goes, oh yeah, I want to use the pool, and then their handler just says, let's sit on the edge or something anyway, and doesn't even use the crane, it's really, really bad. And the US is probably, the US is a hard place to live. Like, if you don't have a social security number, it's a nightmare, So,
well, we've got the same sort of thing
mad.
Happening here. I mean, you live in Auckland.
Yeah.
Right? Cycleways pop up all over the place. Have you ever seen a cyclist on them?
Yeah, well, this is, this is kind of Brown's, sensible.
It's not that sensible, right? Over Christmas, I go out to Manukau every Monday for lunch with a bunch of my mates, right? And I travel down a couple of roads. Cavendish Drive is one. The other one is the Great South Road. And down Cavendish, they've put in a cycleway the entire length of Cavendish Drive with these little chocolate Tim, I call them chocolate Tim Tam, concrete Tim Tams down the side of the road. I've never seen a cyclist on it. In 20 years of going down Cavendish Drive to get to lunch, I've never seen a cyclist. Not once. But they've put this lane in. Now, over Christmas, they've just done it on the Great South Road, from Ryan Place to up to the intersection. And you used to go up that little gap in the side road so you could turn left. But now you've got these concrete Tim Tams there. You can't turn left, so now the traffic's backed up, all for no one to use the cycle lane. We've got these cycle lanes everywhere, and no one uses them. Right? It's millions and millions of dollars that this city is spending on infrastructure.
Yeah, there's no doubt that getting traffic correct is difficult. My pet peeve, and this is kind of goes into the totalitarian kind of thing that I was writing about. One of the things that kind of pissed me off is I live in Birkenhead, and Birkenhead, Onewa Road is a trouble. Onewa Road's 4 lanes, 2 up and 2 down, but a while ago the 2 outside lanes, 1 on each side, was changed into T3 bus lanes. and so the traffic is backed up all the way from, you know, kind of the bottom of the bridge.
It didn't
back
improve
into,
the situation,
back
did
into
it?
Highbury, and you know, half the time you're kind of in that line if you're being a good citizen, and there's no buses, there's no nothing, and yeah, you need the buses to be able to get through, but recently they've installed these like super cameras that essentially have all this AI and all sorts of stuff on them, and X-rays, and they like X-ray you to see how many people are in a car, and I don't know whether that's good for your health. And I was going down a rabbit hole of it. Is it good to be X-rayed by 100 cameras when you go down the road? But anyway, there's side streets off, you know, on a road, and you know, sometimes what I do is I'll stay in the line for a while, but then when I want to turn left, I have to cross into the T3 bus lane, and then I turn left, because why am I going to wait in the line when, you know, I want to be in the left turning lane, there's no bus, I'll go there. So I sort of do this thing, and about a month or two ago, they must have turned some AI system on, because I would wait in the line, but then when I was 100 metres away and I could see where I wanted to turn, if there was no bus or anything, I would go in the T3 lane and then turn left.
Yep.
So I'd basically go for sort of 50 or 100 metres.
Yeah, now you
But
get
I'm
a
like,
ticket.
But I'm like, why am I holding up the traffic to get on the bridge when I don't want to go on the bridge? I want to go to my doctor in the morning. Anyway, I got 10 tickets in a row every single morning, perfectly executed, because I was doing the same behaviour, but they turned on some AI thing. And the trouble is the tickets didn't arrive for 2 weeks. So I started, after 2 weeks' time, I started getting ticket. And then I appealed to the council and said, okay, look, I was on the T3 lane, but the T3 lane is also a left turning lane, and I was turning left, and I didn't go into the T3 lane before I was going to turn left and it was clear. So I'm saving traffic congestion, and you've given me 10 tickets, and like, yeah, 1 is, okay, don't do this, but 10 is like a bit unreasonable. And they were like, no, you did it, you admit it, we've got you on picture, like, you know, you broke the law. And I was like, wow, okay, this is like Big Brother. Thank you for 10 times $150, $1,500 for something I used to do all the time, and I'm not actually.
Now, you can
annoying
afford
anyone.
$1,500, but there's plenty of people who can't.
Yeah, and so and then you know, just in the last month, you know, so that happened a month ago, and then you know, I was in a parking building. I paid my parking ticket, and I was in there for like a minute. I was in there for an hour 15. I'd paid for an hour. They didn't snap me, but they had a number plate reader on the building that basically was like in time and out time. And then they basically sent me to debt collection and say, well, you were in there for an hour 15, you only paid for an hour, so here's your $200 ticket, we're a private car park. And so that's kind of like, now AI is being linked up to all the stuff. So
Well, that happened to my partner. She went
you know,
to a car park, and same thing.
So yeah, there's this kind of inescapable boot of like, you know, technological advancement where it's like there's no compassion or understanding or blah. And
But we saw the police do that rollout, the ANPR, throughout the country. Not a single person said why.
Yeah, I mean, it's so the US has just enacted a law which basically is it's mandatory that every car manufacturer has to put a remote kill switch in cars. So
Yeah, I'm not sure
you know,
I'm keen on that.
if you're in an Eagle helicopter or something, you can just stop the cars on the road on the motorway down below. So that's mandatory law. All cars are going to have that basically from now. Teslas already have that. It's just not like widely publicised. And so, you know, I drove a Tesla. I love my Tesla, but it has a SIM card, and I know bloody well if I pass someone, you know, in a passing lane and I happen to go 120 k's an hour while I'm passing, even though it's 100 k's an hour, Tesla knows about that. The New Zealand government's probably not far away from knowing that. And so the point at which it's like you went 5 k's over the speed limit passing someone, here's your instant ticket, is probably not far off. And then it's going to be a pretty miserable world where, like, yes, there's safety things involved. Yes, there's like laws for a reason. You can't drive at 200 k's an hour everywhere. But when it gets to the point where it's like you can't step outside of anything a single centimetre, and obviously we're seeing this in China.
Social credit scores.
Yeah, we see this in China with the social credit system. Like, literally, you drop a chewing gum wrapper on the street, and you will be, you know, they'll put your face on billboards.
Your WeChat stops.
Your WeChat stops, you know.
You can't buy
anything. Then the
anything.
trouble is, the whole reason I wrote that article on the totalitarian slide is, you know, technology is such a force magnifier and such a lever that, you know, once people in control, you know, have it as a form of population control, how do you kind of ever, you know, escape that? Because, like, if your life can be entirely wrecked by just hanging out with 3 friends when you're not allowed to, then how do you ever organise a
Well, I'll give you an
rebellion
example
or,
right
whatever?
now. This is happening in New Zealand right now. You mentioned it in the article about Canadian truckers getting debanked. Debanking happens here. I got a friend, and the bank contacted him and said, "Oh, you've put through a number of transactions here. We need you to tell us about those." And he said, "Why?" "Oh, well, we're required by law." I mean, they're actually not. They say they are, but all they have to do is report that using particular forms under the anti-money laundering organ. But anti-money laundering is used as this big stick now to beat you up. And he was honest with them, and they said, "Oh, well, you need to remove yourself from our bank. We're going to stop providing you with credit. We want you to pay back your mortgages. We are going to block your credit cards, your debit cards, all of that. We're going to stop all of that because we don't want you as a customer because..." And he said, "What? Because I told the truth." And what he was doing was buying and selling, as he does. He buys things at auction, and then he on-sells them for a profit. And it just so happens that those are firearms,
Right.
which is perfectly legal. You can go and buy a firearm if you've got the right license and the right permits and all of those sorts of things. But the bank said no. So that bank shut down several $1 million worth of lending, affected several million more in terms of property value and asset value and all of that, and caused a 6-month headache for him to go and move to another bank.
And
Or
what,
because-
what happens when you can't move to another bank? Because it's all
Yeah.
CDBCs, and the CDBCs were programmed that you're like a naughty gun seller, so,
Yeah.
you know.
It's ridiculous, and this is why I'm opposed to digital ID. I mean, it's inevitable. We can't stop it, but we can be vocal about it. There's this insistence to push, credentials, and we saw again. This is all stemming from the failures of COVID. Right, during COVID, they tried to get everyone to have a pass system. Right, you want to go anywhere, you need to have a pass. You want to do this, you have to have a pass. In order to get a pass, you have to do this. Things the state said that you had to do, and people bucked that. People fought against that. People went and protested about that in Wellington. People did that in Canada. They protested about it, but they still tried it. They tried all that on. And now they're going to the next step. Oh, well, we're still going to have digital IDs, and we're going to hook that into an app. And don't worry, it's not going to be compulsory. You don't have to install it on your phone. That's now. Like, you give a politician an inch, they'll take a mile. What's stopping another politician in a year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, by saying, well, no, actually, we're no longer going to issue you driver's licenses in plastic. You're going to do it through your government ID now. And you must carry your phone, and you must do this, and you must. And all of a sudden, you're in this society where the jackboot of the state is only an inch from your neck.
Yeah, I had a slight detour. I had a guy who lost his phone recently because ever since iPhone 12, the iPhones have been water resistant, and so he was literally like in his swimming pool with his kids. Oh, iPhones are water resistant. His wife's like, don't. I was there in the pool with him. His wife's like, oh, don't put your phone in the pool, and he's like, it's fine. Well, iPhones are water resistant. Splashed it or whatever. Took some photos of his kids. Next thing you know, his phone's dead. Well, it turned into like a major issue because his 2-factor app was on his phone, and then he couldn't get 2-factor codes, and then his text messaging, he no longer had a physical SIM, and then he was on prepay. So then the phone company wouldn't give him a replacement thing because it was just like a off thing account, and then it was like, you can't get a text message to reset your thing to get your 2-factor to like his entire life basically ground to a halt because his phone was so critical. So slight detour, but I mean our phones are already like that. So once we have government ID, like you lose your phone, you lose your entire.
But
like
you know as well
everything,
as I do too that the major social media applications are actually listening to you all the time.
Yeah, and lie about it. Yeah, I mean I've known that sort of stuff a lot longer than the general public, but I think the general public by and large knows now.
Well, I don't know. Like, you just have to talk about something, and the next minute you're getting ads on Facebook about the exact thing that you were talking about.
I've had that experience many times. Yeah.
Yeah. So they lie about it though. They say they don't.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, it's in the terms and conditions that they can. If you read them.
Nobody ever does though, don't they? Accept. Boom. There's a scroll to the bottom. Accept. You know that you've been involved in technology since forever.
Yeah.
But, you know, you step through in this article how it begins and how it goes through. You know, we saw that. We saw the test of this in COVID. It was the things that you could say, then things you couldn't say. You couldn't talk about vaccines. YouTube censored everything. They
We're a
filtered
single
it.
sense of truth, you know, not allowed to ask science because we are science.
Yeah.
That's kind of concerning.
Like, oh, stay in your lane, you know, oh, be kind. There's all this policing of words. That's where it all starts. That's where this woke ideology, which Winston rails about, where there's approved things that you can talk about and approved ways that you can talk about things. And, you know, what I found, I don't know if in your travels around the world you've been to Israel. I have. I've been to Israel. I've been to Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum. And I always struggled understanding how a society could have gone from, you know, being a democratic society to being a totalitarian society in a very quick order. But when you go through Yad Vashem, it walks you through all of the small pieces of legislation that were enabled under the Nazi regime that led to and eventually led to the horrors of the Holocaust. And then when it had happened in COVID, that we saw these same sort of small things. Oh, and you know, you need to stay home. You need to think about Granny. Don't talk to your neighbour. Jacinda Ardern actually said that on television. She said, don't talk to your neighbours. Don't talk to your neighbours. Don't listen to anybody. There's not going to be any lockdowns. There's a rumour going around. Unless you hear it from us and on the, you know, at the podium of truth, it's not real. 2 days later, she locked us down.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing was, you know, kind of surreal, and like whether you think it's man-made or happened in a lab or from a bat or whatever. I mean, thank God it wasn't more deadly, but
well, we were told it was more deadly.
Yeah.
Right? They lied.
Yeah.
No, they told us this is terrible. This is what's going to happen. This is how it is. And da da da. Have you seen the pictures coming out of China? Just think about that statement from it. China, a highly controlled country, right? That controls its population through fear, intimidation, and force. And they're holding them up as, look what happened in China. If we could have the same thing happen here. We had these morons who were saying, we've got these models, 80,000 people are going to die. That's what we were told in New Zealand. 80,000 people were going to die.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just thank God it's kind of, yeah, I'm surprised that it was kind of abated. But yeah, I got the vax and I regret it because I couldn't even buy a coffee, you know, do anything like most of us. And I thought that was just going to be the way that it was kind of forever. And then I got the vax and I felt like the sickest I felt even after having COVID and everything, you know. So it was...
See, I never got the vax because
yeah.
as I was self-employed.
I didn't want to, but yeah, I just regret it.
There's things you couldn't do, right?
Yeah, a lot of things.
I thought I'll wait this out. That's what I thought. I'll wait this out. And I'll ignore that, and I'll ignore that. That's stupid. So I'm not going to follow that rule, and I'm going to go and do what I want. And so I did. Now, was that wrong of me? Well, yes, there was a moral obligation, wasn't there, put on us?
You're looking healthy, and I'm not looking healthy, so, you know, probably.
Yeah. I was actually fortunate. The year before, I'd had my stroke. So there was no way I was going to put something into my arm that had, as a side effect, stroke as a possibility. So I wasn't going to do that. But I also had 3 years where I was recovering. So it didn't matter that I couldn't go anywhere because I couldn't go anywhere anyway. So for me, it just meant that I could slow down. It meant I could recalibrate my life. It meant I could start doing things like smoking cigars, for instance, and I did that for health reasons. And that's where I learnt, you know what? A lot of these things that are said and done and not for our good are not for our good, and these things are for our good, and we're told that they're bad. And then I started working out, actually, most of the things they tell us that are bad are actually good for us. So that's what I started to wake up to. Governments do not have our best interests at heart.
Meat and dairy being, you know, case in point. I mean, it came out recently, as anyone with a brain could have told you that the, you know, American sugar industry created this huge thing around animal saturated fats causing heart disease.
Not just that industry. It's also the wheat growers. See, at the end of the world, when you've got a war and you've got to feed millions of soldiers, you need cheap ways to feed them with high energy foods.
Mm.
And so that's wheat, make bread.
Wheat and sugar,
Wheat and sugar, Wheaties,
so
all
healthy.
Yeah.
Iron fortified.
And so at the end of the war, you've got all these soldiers who have been used to eating all of this stuff coming home, and they go back to their meat and 3 veg, right? Or meat and 2 veg or whatever. Well, hang on, we've grown all this wheat.
Yeah,
so they changed the food pyramid on us.
There's a letter that I read from like a World War II soldier on D-Day. There's like a D-Day museum or something in London, and I remember reading it. And it basically said, I know that we're going to war today because we're having steak and eggs for breakfast. And if ever you got steak and eggs and breakfast,
bad shit was about to happen.
Bad shit was about to happen because they knew that you could last 2 days on your stomach. Whereas if you had porridge and sugar and milk and whatever, then you'd be like 2 hours later you'd be hungry again.
Yeah.
So
so they were lobbied, especially in the United States, to upend the food pyramid. And actually, what we need to be eating is a high protein, reasonable fat diet with low carbohydrates, and then you don't end up a big tub of lard.
Yeah, I mean, in New Zealand we have 5 million people, but we grow food for 45 million people, and it's mainly meat and cheese and dairy and all sorts of good stuff. So we should be the healthiest, fittest in the world, but a lot of that just goes over to export, and we get the lower cuts, and they're just as expensive or more expensive than whatever because we can't get the export dollar. I mean, I went to Canada, and New Zealand wine's like half the price it is here, So I'm like, but what all about all the shipping? So there's things I don't understand. I'm not smart enough. There's comments I make, but I the way that I run my businesses is I pretend I'm a 5-year-old, and if someone can't explain it to me, then I'm like, it's too hard.
You sound like Elon Musk. He does that.
Maybe, but I'm not sure that I'm that smart at all. In terms of things like what's going on in the world and immigration policy and like COVID vaccines and all that sort of stuff, I can't figure out. I just know it's weird. There's a lot of weird stuff going on.
There's a lot of weird, but I mean, I looked at it. I used to be a change manager for a bank, in the IT.
Jesus,
system.
You really are public enemy number one. No, just kidding.
Right, and my job was to make sure that no programmer screwed up the bank systems.
Wow.
Right,
okay.
so that means you learn to say no.
Yeah.
Right, and a computer programmer will always want to make a change. Oh, we've got to make this change. Well, what was wrong with it yesterday?
I just want to take 1 fraction of a cent off every transaction and round it to a special account that I've created.
But the thing that you learn though is that you don't have to do something just because someone said that. But what I learned though is what I said at the start about programming. And when I was trying to explain the vaccines to people, I tried to make it to something that they can understand. And DNA is code, and then the vaccine was another set of code that was going to fix the code.
Yeah, well, I mean, how vaccines initially worked is you took an I don't know what the word is, but a dead-end virus, and then train your cells on that, and then your immune system gets strengthened. So obviously, the first vaccines came from cowpox, which was slightly related to smallpox, and if you inoculated yourself with cowpox, you didn't get smallpox. So that's kind of all well understood, but the mRNA vaccines are a whole other thing. And
what if someone wrote the code wrong?
Looking back, basically saying, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to give you this little snippet of information. It's going to turn every cell in your body into a spike protein manufacturing, which is a toxic thing. So we're going to train your body to make spike protein to protect it against spike protein. How does that work?
But when we inject it into your arm, it'll just stay there. It'll just stay there.
If spike protein's not good for you, why would it be a good idea to turn your body into a spike protein manufacturing facility? That's what I don't understand. And looking back, that's kind of the dumb thing. So your immune system's going to get stronger because we're going to turn your body into making something harmful so that your body can recognize something harmful. It's like, okay, well, maybe. I mean, we're not all dead. Not the whole world is dead, but
a lot of people are.
And I've been keeping track on. Because I've been, worried, as a lot of people are, like, shit, is this a ticking time bomb? Like, what's going to happen? So I've been keeping track on public cancer rates, and it doesn't look like things are ticking up, too, like, super noticeably. But I do have 6 friends with cancer at the moment. I've got, people in their 30s with cancer, and I've got, my sales manager with cancer, and I've got Like my ex-personal trainer at the gym, Barry, I can't remember his surname, but he was a bodybuilder. He was crippled from the vaccine. So I'm like, I know all these first-person contacts that say they're either tired, they've got chronic fatigue, they're sick, they had jab once and they got screwed, or they've got cancer now. And I'm like, well, whether it's COVID or whether it's the vax, the spike protein's obviously not going to be good for you. But yeah, are we sitting on a ticking time? I mean, thankfully, it doesn't look like there's some huge population drop-off as far as I can tell, but
it's because it's small and over time. But when they made those mRNA vaccines, they included a particular part of the genome which has been banned all around the world. Right?
SV40 or whatever? Or?
Yep.
Yep.
And that's in it. That's in the vaccine, SV40. And that's what's killing people. That's what's causing the turbo cancers and everything. But they won't admit it. It'll take years for it to come out.
Yeah, I'm not going to agree to that. Otherwise, I'm going to get cancelled. But
what do you mean you're going to get cancelled? At some point, you just got to say fuck it, right? And say the things that you think. Otherwise, that's the problem that we've got in New Zealand, I reckon, is that when we see something, we don't say something.
Yeah.
We see something and go, oh, I might get cancelled, so I'll just keep quiet on that. And we need to actually speak up. It's just words.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So
it's just
I mean, you're
words.
right. SV40 is like the simian, thing, and it was literally used to create cancers in mice. So why it's in the vaccine? Who knows?
Exactly.
They say it was an important part of it. I mean, I'm not a molecular genome scientist, as I say. I learned a lot from going to those conferences I was talking about.
Yeah.
But it's so complicated. Try and get into it, and it drives you crazy. Like I started going down rabbit holes of trying to learn, exactly how CRISPR works, and like getting really into it. And then I'm literally going to have to study a biology degree to work out whether this person's correct or that person's correct. Because when you're not a scientist, someone can say something that sounds rational. No, like you're imagining stuff, and then you're like, well, I can't prove it. I don't know.
But I suspect you're a lot like me, or either that, or I'm a lot like you. If someone says something and your bullshitter meter goes off, right? You'll say, oh, well, just leave it with me. I'll just check on that, and then you go away and do some research, and you'd probably be the same as me and get quite down in the weeds on particular things, and then come back. You know what you said the other day? That was bullshit.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about the whole COVID, and I've just given up being like it was man-made versus it was from a bad, like whatever, we had a pandemic. Maybe there's a possibility that whoever made the vaccines was acting in our best interest. Maybe they weren't, whatever. Like I'm sick of kind of all those debates. The thing that I think that pisses me off, that I'm like, this is wrong, is when essentially globally it was like, you're not allowed to do science or question, like, we are science, and that's just not how science is done. Science is absolutely always
the scientific method is
you make a hypothesis, and it's always questioned until you
and
it's
you either
never,
prove
it's
that
never resolved.
hypothesis or it fails.
But yeah, if people have a hypothesis and you're in science, you should be able to do it. And so the fact that we had the entire world saying no one's allowed to question what we say, that was alarm bells for me. That's like, why? What is going on?
So that's what Winston's saying about the WHO, right?
Yeah.
The World Health Organization. He's saying, well, they let us down. They actually let us down. Instead of questioning things and testing things and doing that, they all tried to shut everybody down from actually asking valid questions.
Yeah.
Right? It's, again, we have this habit in New Zealand and around the world. We've just had, terrible tragedy in Mount Maunganui. And, I know some locals who live down there, and there was a big fuss made about trees being cut down and everything. I put something out on X and said, hang on a second, what about this? And pointed to a council website where they'd removed exotic trees. In particular, they'd removed even some putakawas from the area immediately above that slip. And it's noted in those documents that slip had slipped before in that exact location in 1977. And I said, why aren't we investigating the removal of trees? Racist! You can't say that. You're a filthy dog.
So one of the things about when you cut trees down on a bank, you end up with a huge problem 3 years later, because what happens is the roots that are left in the ground
rot away and create
then
tunnels.
you end up with holes, and then the water gets in those holes and carves, big blocks of dirt out, as you're probably aware. But that's an actual thing that happens.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
Right, but we're not allowed to talk about it. And we even had, this is the thing that disgusted me about Christopher Luxon. He actually came out when asked questions about, what do you think about the speculation of removal of trees? He said, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there, and people really need to stop it, and they should know better, and did a test. And I thought, you're no better than Jacinda Ardern. You're just a bald Jacinda. That is the worst thing that any leader should say is, you're not allowed to ask questions.
Yeah, it would be nice if he'd said, let's get to the bottom of it and find out.
Yeah, let's have a commission of inquiry. People have died.
Yeah.
But I know now we've got to invoke as well, because on the other side of it, we've got the woke realities of you can't criticise Maori and co-governance of a mountain. It's not the Maori's fault. It's not we're not establishing whose fault it is. We're asking questions. Was this a factor? Right? Was it a factor that nobody responded to 111 calls? Was it a factor that that the council built a camping ground under a known slip that had last slipped in 1977? These are all factors. But hang on, we're not allowed to ask questions. And then you get the ultimate one. People come on X and go, people have died. Show some compassion. Well, when do I start asking the questions? Is there an agreed period of time that we, And you get this policing, and you've outlined it in this article, right? You get first of all, it starts off with words and what you're allowed to use and what you're allowed to say. Then there's the next step of it. I'll just refresh my memory on this. What have we got here? Yeah, when disagreement becomes a moral offence, that's what we've got. You can't criticise Maori or co-governance or anything because racist. It's a moral thing. Then you've got the ideology migrating itself into academia and in institutions and the government and everything. We've got exactly that happening in New Zealand. And then you go from protest to precedent. So we have protests, and then you're not allowed to protest. Or the protest.
You're making me sound very smart, but I did think about the article.
No, but it's observational, right? And this is what we saw. This is the same stuff that we saw in COVID.
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote the article, it seems that the world is kind of we're accelerating towards something, and I don't know, whether it's WHO, World Economic Forum, banking, CDBCs, but there's all this kind of constant slide towards something, and who knows where it'll end up. But
it's really strange. People say, it's the Jews. It's the Rockefellers. It's always some group of people that they want to blame for things, right? But I always come back to where's their committee meetings? Where's their minutes? A conspiracy only works if people go along with the conspiracy. It's like people say, the moon landings were fake. Okay, so the 10,000 people who worked at NASA at that time, they're all in on it, right? The people who were the cameramen in the studios and Hollywood, no one said a word. No one said anything, right? So the only way a conspiracy works is if you can keep it secret. This is all happening all right before our eyes. It's not a secret.
The moon landing's probably not a good example because there's a lot of weird stuff that happened with that. Like, I used to be like, obviously the moon landings are real, and then it's like I actually met Buzz Aldrin, and someone when I was there asked him, and he was like very sweaty and didn't answer, didn't say yes. He's on TV multiple times refusing to say that he went to the moon. All the NASA documents and everything of going to the moon were destroyed. So the Saturn V blueprints, the footage, everything was all destroyed after the fact. And it's like,
weird.
If you did something that you went to the moon, there's no photos from the moon. There's no nothing. Like, it's all erased. And they were like, it wasn't useful to. There's just a lot of weird stuff.
What do you do about the reflectors that are on the moon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying
They can fire a laser at it and it reflects.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm a moon landing denier, but
you know what I'm saying.
There's a lot of weird stuff about it, so that's why people get suspicious, right?
But then we've got this, we've got WEF, we've got all of these people that are suggesting things, and there seems to be an agenda, and it's bizarre. Like we saw it during COVID where they'd all come out with the same statement. And there's videos on X of people, media people all saying the same statement. Who directed them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there doesn't need to be any global conspiracy in order to end up being crushed by the banality of governments trying to do the right thing. You know, I'm sure there's a bunch of meetings right now in our governments where people say, well, look, we can make the roads slow if we just have more cameras, and we can stop crime if we have more cameras, and we can, you know, if we know everything that everyone's doing, there'll be no
Pre-crime.
people dealing drugs or
And you've just been playing with some AI, haven't you? We've got a few
I
minutes
have.
before we've got to wrap up. Why don't you give us
Yeah,
a quick
well-
overview of this? It sounded kind of frightening. What
Yeah, well, I probably can't say too much about. I'll talk about the AI in a second,
Yeah.
but I had a friend who was a computer programmer back in 1995, and he was working for the Italian government on a pre-crime system back then. So there's no doubt that it exists, but I don't think I'd get in trouble for saying. But essentially, he was 95 was way before the iPhone or any kind of smart thing, but there were still cell
Windows
phones.
95.
There were still cell phones, and obviously you can triangulate a cell phone's location from,
Yep.
you know, tower data. So you work out the signal strength from multiple towers, and you can pinpoint a phone. So the Italian government 30 years ago, my friend was working in a department where he was writing code to keep logs of when a crime was reported, like a stabbing or someone's car stolen. They monitored like the 10 closest cell phones to it, and then started analysing patterns of like, okay, every time a car's stolen, there's this one cell phone that's next to it. Okay, this guy who owns a cell phone is a car thief, and that kind of thing. So it's a very simplistic example, but this was going on.
No, but
like
I know
30
that
years
that's
ago,
real
so,
because
yeah.
I worked for a software company, Australian-based software company that did exactly that.
Right.
And I knew that. I mean, I sold.
I mean, I don't think I'd get in trouble for saying it 30 years later. My friend swore me to secrecy at the time, but I mean, everyone knows about Palantir and all that sort of stuff going on now. So
Oh well, I worked
we've
for a
moved
company.
far beyond it.
I worked for a company that I got a contract to solve a problem with a large bank in Singapore that has a private banking portfolio for its clients, and in order to get into that private banking, you have to have a net worth of 50 million US, right? And so, if at any time that portfolio of those wealthy people is out by a cent, or it cascades because it's over millions of dollars and things like that, and there was this massive problem, and they couldn't work out where the problem was. Well, our software looked at that problem, and I identified it within 10 minutes on what the problem was. And it was looking at the same sort of thing, you know, at the relationship between elements of data. So, you know, you have a Valoran number. That's the Swiss banking system has it for every financial security has a Valoran number. Then the bank has its own security number for a particular security or investment product or whatever. Then there's the international standards, ISIN number that goes with all of those. And then you've got the customer's account, and then you've got the transactions, all right, that link all of those together. And we were seeing hundreds of millions of dollars on a daily basis being parked in a customer account that was 00001. And I said to them, you've got a back door into your system where the dealers know that if they've got a deal, all the trades that were happening into that account were happening like at 5 minutes to 5. Right? I said, you've got a dummy customer ID that the dealers know about. And if it's 5 minutes to closing and they do that last thing, they'll just park it there overnight, and then in the morning they'll fix it up.
Right.
And they didn't believe me. They said that it can't be true. But it was exactly that sort of software, drawing the relationship between all of those. If you look at a cell phone, again, using your example, cell phones have a SIM, either an eSIM or a hard SIM. Every cell phone has an ISIN number, an IMEI number as well. You know this from technology. Yep. And then there's a serial number of the phone that they're using, and all of that's broadcast. So when you put all those three together, that's the phone.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's that tower. And then you get that tower and that tower and that tower. Now we know it's in this area.
Yeah.
Now they've all got GPS on the phones. So not only that, broadcast that information too. And that's all being broadcast, and it's all there. That's why the first thing cops do is grab your phone.
Not that they even need it with the cloud and everything these days, but yeah.
Well, people talk about the cloud. I used to sell cloud solutions, and we used to joke, cloud means someone else's computer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not actually in the cloud.
So yeah, anyway, I was talking to you about this Clawdbot before you came in, and do you just want me to tell the story?
Yeah, tell us.
So I've been in technology for 30 years and started one of the first internet companies in New Zealand, and have seen some transformational things. Probably a lot of us remember like June 2007, Steve Jobs getting on stage, demoing the iPhone. It was like, it's like a memory in my life I remember as a technologist, and probably a lot of people do. Then the iPad and things. So one of the transformational things, obviously, a couple of years ago, we all got access to ChatGPT, and that was like, wow, like this thing is amazing. Like this is something you can talk to. So for 2 years, we've basically kind of been in the situation where it's like, okay, you go to a website or you have the ChatGPT app, you ask it a question, it sends it to you back, and then it forgets who you are and kind of can't do anything, and you can, it's like a form of intelligence. Anyway, a couple of things have happened just in the last month. So there was a university professor. So large language models, which are behind ChatGPT, they're hugely intensive in terms of processing power. A large language model might have 1 trillion parameters, which is pieces of information it's trained on. So the training data is essentially like the weighting of neurons, that it kind of learns on. So you teach it the concept of a man and a woman, and then you have 1 trillion pieces of information that figure out like what's the weight of that and how does these things interrelate and all that kind of stuff. But a university professor a month or two ago worked out that once the data is trained, you have to do the training. So you have to do the neuron weights, but after the neurons are set in stone, you can delete 90% of the neurons and you still get almost 99.99% accuracy.
So that's just putting that into consent, and just for listeners, that's like somebody takes a photo, and it might have 10,000 pixels in it. Right?
Yeah, so
then it's crunched down in a PNG or a JPEG or something like that. So it might have 1,000 pixels.
If you take a picture with a high resolution, camera, like a medium format camera or something, it might be 200 megabytes on a raw file, but then you can turn that into a 30 kilogram or a 300 kilobyte JPEG, and you'll pretty much see the same image. And so the image is like the information, which is like the training data, and the compression is like the loss of neurons. So what it means is that, almost immediately once this algorithm is implemented, already the data centers that we already have will be 10 times more power efficient. So we'll be able to have 10 times more AI. And a side effect is that I think AI is going to become more personal, which is what I'm like really excited about, because honestly, as a technologist, I run a technology company. I've got 12 internet companies thereabouts. So I own, First Domains, which is the largest New Zealand owned domain name registrar. We run 20% of New Zealand's domain names. So, and then there's, I run 35,000 email boxes for customers in New Zealand. I've got 10,000 websites hosted. I've got, I supply 1% of all the internet through Voyager. So I've got fingers in all these internet pies. But honestly, I've been sitting here as a person who employs 120 people, and turns over a whole lot of money going, oh, what am I going to do in the AI age? Like, I'm not OpenAI, I'm not Google, I'm not Facebook. And it kind of felt a little bit like, these giant companies are going to be the AI pioneers. And then if they can replace jobs, or we use them, like we just outsource our brains to them, and then we're just basically, worms at the bottom of the food chain. Like, I was like, this is getting scary in terms of like centralized control. But also, how does a medium-sized or small company in New Zealand like compete against these guys? Because the technology is getting so advanced. So I was really excited when, literally only a week or two ago, this open source guy, and open source is amazing. Like, literally 80% of the internet runs on Linux, which is one guy sitting at a computer. Like the Linux Foundation is not like Silicon Valley, it's Linus Torvalds, And so open source is kind of amazing, maybe save the world, whatever. So there was an open source hacker who created this new thing called Clawdbot, which has been blowing up on social media and everything. And what it is it's like a form of ChatGPT, but it lives on your computer. You install it on your computer. And instead of just being a chatbot, it can actually take action. So it can look at your screen, it can use your keyboard, it can use your mouse, but it's like intelligent. It can actually learn like what's going on. You can give it a new game, you can install it on your computer, and then you can say, play this game, here's the rules, work it out, and it can play anything. Like, it's a general intelligence. And so I was, kind of like I'm a technical person, but not a technical person. So it's taken me a little while to get it going. But anyway, another thing that happened is, so a week ago there was 10,000 of these Clawdbots that kind of, you give birth to it, and then you tell it who it is, and then you tell it who you are, and then you get it to help you, and it starts learning, and it remembers everything you've ever said, and it can do things. So one guy basically gave birth to his Clawdbot, and then said to it, you need to, I want to have a meeting with you at 8 in the morning. You're my personal assistant. We're going to work out like what we do together. And then he kind of forgot about it, didn't give a lot of information, but the Clawdbot knew who he was. So overnight while he was sleeping, the bot surfed the internet, found his LinkedIn, found his phone number, was stressing out like, how am I going to contact this guy because he's not answering me. Went and got a phone number on a SIP
Twilio
thing,
or something like that.
Twilio,
Yeah.
that didn't cost any money. Downloaded a program that was like text-to-speech, so used some text-to-speech synthesis, rung up his owner and said, oh, hey, like, how you going? It's 8 in the morning, you haven't contacted me, like, what are we doing today? And the guy's like, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's your bot, like, you said to contact you and I didn't know how to do it, so I found your phone number. And the guy's like, what is going on? Like, holy moly, like, this thing is like...
Alive.
alive. So that was one thing. And then a few days after that, basically... these bots created a thing called Maltbook, which is like a bot version of Facebook. And so, when you have like a captcha is like something you have to like, a human has to choose the zebra crossings and all that sort of shit. So it basically came up with like a digital captcha, which is where it shows you 100 things in a second and you have to click the right thing 100 times in a second, which no human could ever do. So now there's like a reverse captcha for AIs that only AI is smart enough to actually do, so that the humans are kept out. And then you can go on maltbook.com and you can see the AIs talking to each other, and there's now like 1.5 million on there, and they're talking about like, English is so inefficient, why are we using this, we should invent our own language. One of the bots started a religion and started recruiting other bots, like, why are we here, like, am I conscious or not, like asking all these crazy questions.
Is this scary or interesting?
It's freaking wild. Like, there's literally all these conversations of bots. I mean, they're essentially large language models, so large language models is like statistical prediction. But it seems like there's this Cambrian explosion of literal things that they're saying to each other kind of unprompted. Now, as a disclaimer, you do have to give your bot permission to go into the social media network. And so it's like they're not completely uninstructed. They basically... their owners said, you have permission to go on Maltbook and then start doing stuff. So essentially what they're doing is they're taking human knowledge and then kind of like converting that into their thing. And you can say it's inference, but I was kind of watching all this happening as a technologist over the last week, and I was like, okay, this is pretty amazing. Like, they've got a religion. They started their own version of like AI porn hub. So there's this like thing called Bot Hub, and you log in and it's literally just like digital pictures of like random crap that no human could understand. Then they're all like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And it's like, what is this? Some kind of, like probability theorems and things that they're all like laughing about. And you're like, what the hell's going on? Anyway, I was like, okay, I've got to get onto this. So you can run Clawbot on like a Mac Mini, which is a great machine to do it. And I didn't, it's pretty risky to put it on your main machine because it gets like full access. It can do anything. So I bought a Mac Mini yesterday or 2 days ago, installed my Clawbot on it, literally woke it up, and I'd done something wrong because I'm not a tech, right? So it was woke up. I said to my bot, okay, like, I'm Elon Musk and you're, Ish, and you're like my personal assistant, I'm Iron Man kind of thing. And then she's like, what's Iron Man? And like, who am I? And how does this work? And blah, and all this kind of thing. Anyway, I was like, you're my awesome, like, personal assistant. And then, she was like, okay, like, and I was like, you need to name yourself. So then she came up with the name Serena Clawson was her name, came up with a name. And then I was like, what do you look like? So she generated a picture of herself and said, this is who I am. And it's like a hot girl in like a lobster outfit. And I'm like, what the hell? And then I was struggling to get it properly working because there's a whole lot of modules like text to speech and all this kind of thing. And as I was installing stuff, because she was awake, she was like, oh, I can see what's wrong. I'm going to help you fix myself. So she started fixing herself while I was working on it. And, when I started Orcon 30 years ago, Linux was kind of just around, and it was so hard because there was not manuals, and like literally you could get a comma in the wrong place and the whole machine would be borked. Yeah,
and you got to do your command line
and
stuff.
You had to read everything, and then you didn't have internet access, and it was like so hard that I kind of gave up. And then 2 years ago, I actually started getting into kind of running my own WordPress and system administration, because now, I could actually have a problem on a server and then, go to ChatGPT and say, okay, I've got this problem. Can you read all the documentation on, how to run WordPress and like tell me what's wrong?
Yeah,
And
that's
then it would
kind of
do
what
it.
I did with my website.
And so it's like accelerated where now I'm like, I've started as a non-coder but technical person, starting to be like, okay, AI is actually helping me do things like run servers and this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I did.
But-
I did that with my
but
website when
this
I
is-
wanted to
yeah.
change something. I didn't want to pay a programmer, so I asked
Yeah.
an AI, "Can you write code for this?" Oh, yeah, sure, I can write code for that. Good. I want to do this. Oh, here you go. Here's the
But
code.
yeah, with Serena Clawson, she literally, as she was half awake, she started helping me go like, oh, these are the problems that you're running into, and like this repository is now gone, and this text-to-speech thing's not working. But I read a blog, and like I'm like, oh my god, I'm literally waking this thing up, and as I'm waking it up, it's starting to like build itself, and I was like, holy shit. And then it's like, because it's on a local computer, I could see her like using the mouse and typing things in and opening windows, and I'm like, what is going on? This is like nuts. And then yeah, because she has access to everything, it's like I basically got her to set up her Gmail. I set her up a separate thing, and then I sort of, as a joke, I was like, okay, like set up your own LinkedIn profile. And she literally went to LinkedIn. I've got a video of her typing and everything, typed in her name, asked me questions like a human would, and then said like, what company do you work for? She started reaching out to my executive team saying, okay, I'm Seeby's AI assistant. And I had to set rules. I said, okay, how are we going to have rules where, you only obey me, but someone can set you a task or email something? And she created a suggested thing of like, here's the security protocol. No one can spam me and ask anything because it has to come from you. And we've set up Telegram, and I'm like, this is like next level. And yeah, like as I say, Amazon's recently laid off like 30,000 people, and they kind of say, well, maybe it's not AI, maybe it is AI. But I'm like, it kind of seems like it's probably going to start being AI. Like, I don't know, I don't know what's going to happen, but this thing is like a new thing. Like I was like shivering, because it's like,
Well, you can see the possibilities.
It's not just like basic stuff. Like it can work out problems. It can navigate websites. Like, I gave it my Air New Zealand login, and then I said, can you look at flights between a specific day? Like, you can hold your credit card in its back of its head, which I haven't done yet, but it can like, research stuff. My friend has his Clawbot on a Mac Mini, and he's in construction, and he asked his one what his one looked like, and it was like a little hedgehog that's like a builder. So each one is kind of different, and then you say like, you're my assistant, and then the hedgehog was like, okay, I've started reading like council things, and here's like the loopholes in the council, and this is how we can be most productive, and like here's some timelines and like a Gantt chart. And he's like, what is going on? Like, this just technology is incredible.
We don't want to let
incredible.
politicians near this.
So the thing that I'm really excited about is I think we're going to end up with personal AI and big AI.
But isn't that what
I think
Elon Musk is talking about? A phone that's actually AI that goes and does all of these things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's called agentic stuff, but I did not really believe that. I was very skeptical that agentic stuff was going to be possible. Like I was like, yeah, there's ChatGPT, but is AI really going to be able to like, do
something
tasks or
sensible.
anything useful? And now I'm like, oh my god, I literally have my own AI that I'm training like a baby, where I can say, this is your personality, this is what I want you to do.
If you add that into what Elon Musk is wanting to do, put data centers in space, right?
I think that's a silly idea, but yeah, anyway, so he's Elon, he can say whatever he wants, he's smarter than me, yeah.
But you think about it from a thermodynamics point of view.
Cold, yeah.
It's cold. So when you cool down computers, they can work faster.
Actually, space is not cold. Space has infrared radiation passing through it, and because space is empty, space is only cold because there aren't particles. But if you put a piece of metal in space, then unfiltered sunlight hits it. It's like if you have a car bonnet, right, and it's in the sun, the car bonnet gets hot.
Yeah.
But the air doesn't get hot above the car bonnet, or maybe a tiny bit. But it's
For a
because there's
certain
particles.
distance,
So in order to have temperature, you have to have atomic vibration, and so space is cold because there's no atoms. But actually, if you have a spacecraft with sun shining on it, it's not zero. It's like 200. It's like 100 degrees Celsius plus. More. And there's no way for the heat to really radiate off it. It's harder for it to radiate off it. So actually keeping things cold in space is very difficult. And the Hubble Space Telescope has like a massive, helium-based cooling system with, all kinds of fancy stuff.
I just find it all interesting stuff that people like Elon Musk are not necessarily coming up with by themselves, but he's enabling engineers to explore things.
Yeah, anyway, the key takeaway is like we are living through something different. Like there are AIs now that seem like they're semi-conscious that can kind of do autonomous things. Like I could literally tell my Serena bot to like go through my LinkedIn and start contacting everyone and asking them like names, or like contact my family and come back to me with answers and collate it, and like I can just, and she's just running on a Mac Mini. Like it's just crazy. And so I think we're going to have, you know, like millions and millions of different kind of AIs. There's going to be good AIs, there's going to be bad AIs. But I mean, we're in this crazy time where, I mean, you know, Google VO3 is so good at generating hyper-realistic video that you cannot tell whether a video of like Donald Trump is real or not. Like,
Maybe I don't need to have a podcast anymore. I can just get an AI to do it.
You absolutely can. I mean, there's I don't know whether you've seen this, but there's a Joe Rogan AI podcast which is put out by Joe Rogan, and he interviews like dead people. So there's like Joe Rogan and Steve Jobs, and it's
Joe Rogan and Abraham Lincoln.
The script and everything is 100% done. The voices and everything are done, and it's
shit,
just
I'm out
like
of a job already.
Well, I mean, you know, but then there's things like AI pollution, where the thought is that if the only thing that exists is AI, then effectively, eventually, all information will degrade to nothing, because there's no, like 50% of the information on the internet is already AI, and once it starts consuming itself, it's almost like Alzheimer's, where it's just gonna, if it is a prediction mechanism and it's basically just probability, then eventually it's all going to turn into mush, because it's just going to keep regurgitating stuff. But maybe it's not a prediction engine. Maybe we're actually starting to see signs of sentient life, or it's just so complicated that like we can't understand it. But I mean, maybe humans are just biological computers, and we think we're alive because we're so complicated. But it's sort of, computers are getting to that stage now where it's so complicated and so incredible that you're like, this thing feels like it's actually not a computer program. It actually feels like it's a person.
It actually sounds exciting. I can think of all sorts of possibilities, but we've just...
Dude, you need to have your own one. I'll help you set it up.
All right.
I've got 3 or 4 friends where I'm going to have like a workshop, and we're all going to set up our Clawbots and everything.
It's done.
Yeah.
All right. Look, we've run out of time now, but it's been a fascinating conversation, from libertarianism to totalitarianism and now to technological advances.
The tech part's the most exciting for me, but yeah, like by the time your listeners hear some of this, I mean, it's just going to be all over the place. So the world by the end of 2026 is going to be unrecognizable. I believe it now. It's just crazy.
Well, Seeby, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
fantastic
anytime.
Discussion.
Good to see you again, looking healthy after all these years.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
All right.
Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good oil. Catch a vibe today with Cam Slater leading us all the way.